as I said, Mark Trestman has been in contact with Aaron Glenn and also Todd Bowles for the offensive coordinator's job. I'm not saying they're going to get these, but as we told you, Tom Condon also is a rep, and we talked to Mickey Loomis a couple minutes ago. So a lot of news is going on here. I want to bring Jason Cole up here because you're preparing for Super Bowl 59, Jason. And all of a sudden now you're filling out a coaching staff if you're Kellen Moore, potentially for New Orleans here. And as of right now, Jason, January 31st, as you know, it looks like Kellen's going to get that job. And I asked you last week this process. Don't you find this process still a little bit weird and shit like this when, you're trying to prep for a game in 9 days?
Yeah, but I don't know what's the other way you do it. I mean, do you say to everybody you have to hold off all your hires until after the Super Bowl? And this is a competitive league. People aren't going to do that. Plus, there's college jobs out there that are getting filled. So you're competing, in some respects with getting assistants out of the college ranks or assistants saying, I need to work. Do I take the college job or do I wait an NFL job? So, there's no way to fix this timeline. It's just the way it is.
Jason, Frank Reich, I've been in contact with him, and Frank has been contacted by the Eagles. Howie's always, as you know, always has a contingency plan on if case something does go sideways. Doug Musmeyer, they may elevate from within, the passing coordinator. Josh McCown, quarterback coach up in Minnesota, also with Philly ties. I mean, they kind of like to stay in that family room, so to speak, does Philadelphia. Yeah. What do you make of Frank? Again, as you know, not every coordinator is going to make a great head coach, and not every, head coach is going to go on to do great things. That was a superstar coordinator. We've seen that in the past. Look at Josh McDaniels. But in your opinion here, man, I mean, what do you make of Frank potentially going back and being in Philadelphia, a place where he won a Super Bowl as the OC?
I mean, I love Frank Reich. I mean, I loved him as a coach in Indianapolis. I thought he did a nice job there. Obviously, the Bryce Young thing got off to a bad start, and it took Bryce the better part of 2 years to sort of get his legs under him. And some of it was they didn't build the proper offensive line to give him a chance to compete, and they certainly didn't build an offense that got the ball out of his hands fast enough. But I don't blame Frank for all of that. In that, the owner got impatient way too fast. And I didn't understand why the owner would jettison a coach that quickly. I think that's more about management. So I don't hold either of the situations, either in Indy or in Carolina, over Frank as an offensive coordinator. I think he's a brilliant mind and has a great background. So I think he'll work. The issue is, look, Jalen Hurts is not the most popular guy in that locker room. You know that. He's been a little difficult for some people to work with. And we'll see. Frank, I think, has the right attitude to be able to deal with a guy like Jalen, and we'll see how it goes.
Well, and to your point, NFC Championship game, out of nowhere, he parachutes a comment, and now they took the straitjacket off me a little bit. There's no doubt. I mean, that's a comment there that you can take whatever way you want. Maybe it was fun and maybe it was a jab, but, as you know, a lot of people love winning, Jason, but a lot of people like winning their way.
Yes. I'll just say this. There are a lot of guys in that locker room. Jalen's not their favorite guy, but they're winning games. So they're all, sort of grin and bear it, and when you win games, you're fine with it. But, he does rub some people the wrong way from time to time. But, again, they're winners, and they got a good chance of winning the Super Bowl with him at quarterback. So you don't mess with something that is working right now in terms of on the field. You put the personality stuff aside.
Who do you think has to take more risk in this game in 9 days, Kansas City or the Eagles?
It's an interesting question. It depends on where you're talking about. Philly needs to take more risks to get scores fast in this game and not let it get into a Chiefs kind of pace. They want this game in more of a frenzied pace. They want to get, preferably you get a lead, but also to play the game fast. I mean, that's really important, I think, for the Eagles, so that they can take advantage of their pass rush, not let the Chiefs cover for the fact that they don't have a great offensive line. Don't let the Chiefs kind of slow play this game the way that they like to play a lot of games. And I know that, the Chiefs scored, enough points in the last game that was not exactly slow playing it. I get it. But that how they want to play is close to the vest, don't make mistakes, don't expose the line, don't expose Mahomes to a lot of pressure, because he's gotten pressured more this year than at any time in his career. 38 sacks in the regular season. That's not a small number. So I think that Philly's got a little more pressure. The other problem for Philly is don't get in the red zone. You don't want to be in the red zone against Spagnuolo, because they're really disciplined in making you settle for field goals when you get into the red zone, and you cannot allow this to become a field goal game for you.
What to me is, people ask me what's the difference from Super Bowl 57 to Super Bowl 59, and I'm like, well, the radical changes are on the Eagle side. It's not on Kansas City side. And as you know, I mean, the team with the least amount of changes that wins, that's the team you want to have win Super Bowls. I mean, change is traditionally not good, especially in the salary cap era. People go like this, well, the Eagles have more talent. I go, let me remind you something about the 49ers with Montana and Rice. There's not one other Hall of Famer on that offense outside of those two dudes. And there were two dudes that were in that team. And in the first Super Bowl, Rice wasn't even on that team. Okay? So I will tell you, when you're looking at people like Bill Walsh, Joe Montana, and Jerry Rice, this is what you have here. You have Spagnuolo, Mahomes, and you have Reid as the play caller. We're not talking about the best in the game. We're talking about some of the best that's ever been in the game. Yes. You've got to do special things against that KC team to beat them, and having a top roster is not the overwhelming thing that's going to beat them. I think they got to do special stuff in this game in 9 days. And I'm not saying crazy shit, but I'm saying, Jason, the last 2 years, would you not agree? The 49ers and the Eagles had the best roster heading into that game, and it didn't matter. They found a way to win like they always do.
Well, I mean, but do remember that the Chiefs have the best quarterback.
Yes.
And the quarterback is a great deodorant. Okay. This particular quarterback is one of the best deodorants ever. He makes up for a lot of things that smell bad on your team, like your offensive line or your lack of great wide receivers. Now, people make a big deal out of the fact that the Chiefs had the fewest explosive plays, or the second fewest explosive plays in the league this year. That is absolutely true. And that's because they've had to play close to the vest with that offensive line. And also because, Worthy has not developed into the deep guy yet. I think Worthy is developing as we're going along here and learning how to play in this league and be consistent in this league. He's got a ways to go, but he is a threat. But he's not the complete vertical threat, like a Tyreek Hill, at the apex of his game. So I think there's a lot that you're right about. But when you have a quarterback, especially a quarterback who is this in sync with his head coach, and they agree on what we're going to do. I mean, Patrick Mahomes has spent a lot of this year dummying down the way he can play. Right? He can play much more aggressively if he wanted to put up some stats, but he's playing to win games. And I give him a lot of credit for the style in which he's played this season.
Would you go this far in saying if they win this Super Bowl, the Chiefs, best play calling head coach and quarterback combo? And I'm still with Walsh and Montana. Okay, those two. But would you not say that with the cap era, with the changing of the rosters, with so many more different dynamics in today's NFL, where like, I mean, then again, that Niner roster was changed over many times because there's only 4 guys with 4 rings in the history of that franchise. Keena Turner, a couple other guys, Ronnie Lott, Montana. I mean, I get it. There's not very many guys like that. They turn that roster over a lot, but still, would you not put that into conversation? And I know he's a product of Holmgren, who was a product of Walsh, and it goes back to the West Coast offense. So, but would you put them in that conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I would put them in the conversation. I put McDaniels and Brady in the conversation, you know, including Belichick in that. I would put Joe Gibbs in the conversation with several quarterbacks in the way that they designed their offense and ran their offense. So there's a fair number, but you were talking about a short list of some of the greatest, certainly in coaching and certainly and usually with a great quarterback next to him. I mean, you're not talking. There's no straps in there. Let's just put it that way.
Saquon Barkley, have you ever seen anything like this where a guy who was basically kicked out the door by Joe Schoen and John Maher, who has to just be in, I've told you numerous times, and you know this, I knew Wellington Maher very well. He's got to be rolling in his grave watching something like this. Seeing a guy that was one of the great faces of the franchise in New York with the Giants and seeing what's going on here. I mean, it just seems every time he gets the football, Jason, he's like a grand slam hitter, and he hits his head on the goalpost almost every single time. I can't think of a guy, maybe back in the day when Peyton was in his heyday, no minus yardage. I mean, a free agent, he jumps in like that and transforms the Eagles from a nightmare of a year ago. Have you ever seen anything like this?
Well, Terrell Davis.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to talk about a guy out of nowhere now, I mean, because remember, he was a 6th-round pick.
Yep.
Comes in, gets 11.
And he was a fullback, and he was a fullback at Georgia. They never used him there. No one knew what he was.
Right. I mean, now that's a little bit more of the kind of classic Cinderella story. Saquon, everybody could see this guy's super talented, and his career was getting wasted in New York. I will say this: what pick do the Giants have right now? Number 3?
I think they're 3rd.
Yeah. Think about this. This is an interesting question. If they had kept Saquon, right, and say Saquon had helped them win 2 more games, and all of a sudden they're picking 11, right? If they pick 11 and they take number 11 and number 3 to try and get up to get a quarterback, is that enough?
No, because Barkley wouldn't look like he does right now. He would still be Barkley, New York.
Right, but so here's kind of my point, right? Like, say they had paid him, now they're looking for a quarterback.
No.
Like, they don't have a whole lot of other assets to trade. No. So, I mean, I'm not saying that this is the best justification in the world, but if you're going to, if you're going to lay down and know that you're going to be bad for a year or two, this might not be the worst time in the world to do it. You got to get the quarterback. Now, unfortunately, I don't think there's a quarterback in the draft worth taking in the top 10.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean,
even my Miami guy, I don't see it. I just don't.
Yeah, no, I mean, like the kid, a guy I respect, put a 3rd-round grade on him, said, "Hey, look, he's a nice player. He's going to go in the 1st round, but he's a 3rd rounder to me." And he said, the Sanders kid is a 2nd rounder. He's going to go in the 1st. That's the way it is, and there'll be 2 more who go in the 1st. Yeah. They shouldn't go in the 1st, but they're going to go in the 1st.
I agree.
And so, so I don't know if it's interesting that what the strategy play is at quarterback, especially everybody's talking about, wait for Arch Manning next year. I don't think Arch Manning's coming out early.
Yeah, no.
I think Arch Manning's going to play 2 more years. You're not going to see Arch Manning until the 2027 draft, is my belief.
I completely agree with you. Do you think in this game, in 9 days, I said this, do you agree or not? I don't believe that the Eagle defense is going to stop Kansas City's offense. You're going to have to prove it to me because I've not seen anybody do it.
They're on a hell of a run, aren't they?
Man, I just don't see. I don't care if they're number one. You're going to have to prove to me in a game like that you can stop that coach and that quarterback and that tight end. When Zach Ertz got 11 catches last week and ate up the middle of that secondary for the Eagles. And I know they were behind, so those numbers are a little skewed. But on the other hand, Jace, I don't believe the Kansas City Chiefs defense is going to stop that old line in Barkley. You're going to have to prove to me. I saw 18 weeks of them rolling people over. And the most physical football team I've seen since the Cowboy line and Emmett's line, they're mauling people. I think this is going to come down to those two sides of the ball.
Like the Chiefs, let's put it this way. The Eagles have more of an advantage of their defensive line against the Chiefs' offensive line than the Chiefs have against the Eagles' offensive line, certainly, right? Like you give the advantage to the Eagles on both sides. But the Chiefs can play up front on defense. Like they can, Chris Jones can cause you problems, right?
Look what he did last year in the Super Bowl in the fifth quarter. I mean, he wrecked the game and gave the ball and got the ball turned over to Kansas City, and they won it.
Yes. So I just think it to me, it's a really interesting matchup. I think that Philly's going to get their yards.
Yep.
But as I said at the beginning, they've got to get some explosive plays that flip the game into a let's play fast break. Like it's to the advantage of the Eagles to play in a fast break game because it plays to the advantage of their offense. They've got a better big play offense. It also plays to the strength of their defense. And it is not the way that Kansas City wants to play the game. They don't want to play at a high speed. All right. They want to slow this game down. And so to me, the Eagles really need to do everything they can to push this pace early in the game.
I wrote these 5 names down, Jason. Here are my 5 best quarterbacks that have ever played in the Super Bowl. Okay. Number 1, Brady. Number 2, Montana. Number 3, Bradshaw. Number 4, Mahomes. And number 5, Elway.
The 5 best Super Bowl quarterbacks of all time.
Yeah.
And you're going Brady, Montana, Mahomes?
No. Brady, Montana, Bradshaw, Mahomes, and Elway.
Yeah, but Bradshaw didn't do anything for the first 2 games that he played in. I mean,
neither did Brady.
Wait a sec. Brady's very first one, he had the drive at the end of 7.
Oh, the Rams. The Rams drive to get it in field goal position for Vinatieri.
Yeah, the other thing is Brady's got 7 of them. Like it's like I mean, literally, what did Bradshaw throw? 12 passes or 16 passes in one of those games.
And he was more of a factor in the back end of that dynasty because if you remember, he threw for over 300 yards against the Rams, but that was at the back end because the front end they were more of a Franco and defensive football team in the first 2 wins, and he was more the one in the second. The other 2, like 3 and 4. So still, you're.
Well, I mean, the rules have changed. It allows Swan and Stallworth to be more factors. I mean, they changed the blocking rules and the check rules by the end of their dynasty. So things are very, very different. Mahomes is a better player. Mahomes has been better. Mahomes has been a better player in the Super Bowl than Bradshaw. Bradshaw has some big throws, no question about it, and there's a reason he's got 4 rings. But if you're asking me to rate it, I put Mahomes ahead of him. I would go. To me, it goes Brady, then Montana, then Mahomes, and Mahomes getting real close on Joe. He hasn't had a John Taylor throw and some of those things that Joe did in the Super Bowl, but it's getting awful close.
You know, I think Montana played better in the Super Bowls than Brady and Mahomes.
It's arguable. I think that there's a lot can be said for that.
No turnovers in the Super Bowl and 14 touchdown passes, 140 quarterback rating, and he's beating people like Elway and Marino. We're not talking about stiffs here. We're talking about some of the greats that ever played.
No, this is true. I mean, the Elway, the Marino game, the Cincinnati games.
I mean, we're not talking about Eli Manning and Nick Foles here. We're talking about Elway and Marino. I mean,
I get it, but again, getting the 9 of them, you get to 9, you win 7 is.
I get it.
That's that ain't that's hard. That's hard to beat. Like that.
Even in Miami math, I know 7 beats 4. I got it.
7 beats 4 by a lot. And if you give credit for the 2 other losses, and those were great games. You ain't going. Look, as I always say, I'll take the second pick. You can have first. You can have first pick. I'll be good. I'm good. I'm good at 2, and I'm good at 3. I'm good.
That's right. I am. I'm good with any one of those guys. Actually,
yeah. I mean, I'm even good with Bradshaw and Elway. You can. I mean, that's some great stuff.
Oh,
I mean,
geez, you're gonna give me Elway? I'm good with that one too. I'm good.
Yeah,
with that.
I mean, none of this is bad. None of it's bad.
2 more here. I got one here for you on Andy Reid. Doesn't Andy Reid get the now? Again, this is going to be the Stanford math versus Miami math. Okay, when it comes 6 versus 4, if Andy does win. So again, this is the math that you always land on, that you're right on. But isn't it more to be said about Andy Reid going to 2 different places and being a champion in so many ways? I mean, he helped Philadelphia.
He's only really a champion. He's only really a champion in 1.
Yeah, but
there's only been 1 coach.
He did go to 5 NFC championship games.
He did a hell of a job. He did a hell of a job. But there's only 1 coach in the history of the league who ever won titles in 2 different places, and that's Weeb Eubank.
Yep.
And so Weeb did some pretty spectacular things at 2 different places. Now the game was primitive.
But they were the 2 most significant games in NFL history.
Well, and Holmgren won a title in 1 place and made Seattle a contender.
Yep.
Too. So Reid's way up there. Reid's climbed into the top 5 coaches of all time. And who else? You're gonna have Belichick, Lombardi, Brown. Would
you put Shula there?
No, I wouldn't put Shula there. I'd put Gibbs there instead of Shula.
How about Noel?
No, not Noel. Noel's in the next group. Noel and Shula are in the next group.
Walsh?
Walsh is that's the question. How does Walsh factor in versus Brown and Lombardi? That's
Joe Gibbs?
One. See, Joe Gibbs is vastly underrated because Joe Gibbs is the only coach in the history of the league who ever made the quarterback a replaceable part. And people do not understand how crazy it is that you can win 3 different Super Bowls with 3 different quarterbacks in a decade. He truly made him a replaceable part. Even within the same season, like Doug Williams took over for Jay Schrader, and they went on and won a Super Bowl, right? Like, that's amazing stuff. Like, you built an offense that was so great that you could go from one guy to the next, to the next, to the next.
Finally here, what did you make of the Brian Schottenheimer hire in Dallas?
Oh, come on. There's only one. What are you doing? Come on.
I got a text message from Michael Irvin. He goes, "You see what Jerry hired? He hired Schottenheimer." I go, "Kyle left San Francisco?" And he goes, "No, Brian." I go, "OC, you got there now?" He goes, "Yeah." I'm like, "Oh my God." I'm like,
it's a joke. Come on, it's a joke. Just rearrange the letters in Schottenheimer and you get Dave Campo. Come on. Or you get Jason Garrett. You get
Chan Gailey.
Chan was a little bit sharper than those guys, but yeah, I mean, you get just guys who are they're guys who are just going to get whipped, and they'll take the abuse because it's a chance to be a head coach in the NFL, and you beg for those opportunities. I get it. I understand why guys take the job, but they're not going. They don't have the gumption to stand up to Jerry and say stop talking, because they would, if they had the gumption to do that, they wouldn't have gotten the job. It's a joke. It's just a joke. That's all it is. It's just Jerry. And here's the point. I think that Jerry has finally reached the point where fans are going to get disillusioned.
Yeah.
Right. And if this doesn't really work, now they've still got good players, so they can be competitive next year and salvage it. But if it doesn't work in the next 2 or 3 years, and they blow him out of there, and the team starts to fall apart, like all of a sudden there's going to be some empty seats in Dallas. And they don't do empty seats in Dallas.
No, not at those prices there. Jason, let me sneak this in here on you on Kellen Moore. Is the Saints job a good job? I love Mickey Loomis, the Benson family. They're really great sports folks. It's a really great fan base. Do you think they got $50 million? They got to whack off that cap still. They're in cap hell. They got to decide. This year, Derek Carr is guaranteed as of right now $10 million. After March, it's another $30. You've got to determine whether he's your guy or cut him pre-June 1 or post-June 1, whatever it is. And do you think that's a good job for him to take?
If you go in there with the sort of gravitas, and I don't think Kellen is this guy, but
he's not.
The Sean, you have to go in with the sort of Sean Payton. Here's the big plan. Here's what we're going to do. Here's how we're going to turn it around. I'm going to do this, this, and this. We're going to wait a year. We're going to get the quarterback. We're going to do this. You have to have a plan. You have to follow it. And you have to have the personality that will make it play. Because I don't think Gail Benson wants to fire anybody. She didn't want, she doesn't want to make those kinds of moves. She's not interfering. And Mickey wants it to work because Mickey wants to ride out the rest of his career, with a good team, and he doesn't want it to splash on him, right? So you have people who are not going to interfere with you. At the same time, you have a bad cap situation that finally needs to get cleaned up, and you don't have a quarterback. And you got to find a way to get one. Now, Sean Payton, for all the gumption and all the everything that he had coming in after Katrina and all that, he did have a quarterback land in his lap.
Yes.
Right. Like I give Sean a lot of credit, but Drew Brees shows up, there because he's got an arm that's,
and nobody knew he was going to be. They were kind of an outlier because he had broken his shoulder in San Diego, and everybody was after Dante Culpepper at the time. And it turns out that Breeze was put back together like Humpty Dumpty by Dr. Andrews, and it worked. I kind of think he got lucky in a way.
Dr. Andrews didn't think that Drew was going to be able to throw at the beginning of the year.
That's right.
That's what he told. That's what he told Nick Saban at the combine. He said, he might only be able to throw short passes at the beginning of the season. Saban freaked out. I mean, for good reason too. But you gotta go. You got as with anything, you gotta get the quarterback. You gotta get it right. You gotta get a little lucky in that process. But I think you have to go in with a very strong plan and a direction and a focus, and you have to say, we're going to do these following things that are either going to tear it down to the studs and start over, or say, I can do this with Derek Carr, and here's how I'm going to do it with Derek Carr. You can't go any other. You have to go one way or the other and be decisive. And Kellen Moore doesn't come off to me as like super decisive.
Wow. It's going to be interesting to see what happens here, because supposedly Tom Pelissero saying he's putting his coaching staff together now, and that announcement will be made, according to Tom, after the Super Bowl. So we'll see here. Jason, I appreciate it, brother.
All right. We'll talk to you later, dude. Be good.
You got it. Our great Hall of Fame voter, Jason Cole. Make sure you check out his work. Please hit that like button. By the way, the legendary Philly 500 will join us at 4:30 Eastern time. Zander's still going to join us at the 5 o'clock hour, but we will say this to you, my friends. We are so proud to have Morgan & Morgan back on the program. I've known John Morgan for over 20 years. He's invested in my show and in me for over 20 years, and he's done something for you and your family if you so choose to pick their law firm. They make sure that they get the best return if you're injured in any way for you and your family. Their resume speaks for themselves. Again, with over $20 billion recovered for clients, Morgan & Morgan, like I said, the track record speaks for itself. I gave you a story about a client in Pennsylvania that was first initially given $650K by the insurance company. No way. Morgan & Morgan rolled back in there and got that guy $26 million. Or here's another one here. Somebody offered $350,000 an insurance company. Morgan & Morgan and his team went in there in Florida with a client, and they got that guy $12 million. That's the track record that Morgan & Morgan have. Listen, everyone knows life is tough, and making decisions like that are some of the biggest decisions you'll make. Choosing Morgan & Morgan will be one of the easiest decisions that you make. If you're ever injured, check out my friends at Morgan & Morgan. The fee is free unless you both win. For more information, go to forthepeople.com/big sales or pound 529. That's FOR thepeople.com/big sales or pound law 529. And do me a favor, you tell them Big Sales sent you.
This is Eric. When he got injured in a car accident, he called Morgan & Morgan. He not only gets a lawyer, he gets trial lawyers like Sam and Jessica who are in it to win it. He gets his own investigators with briefcases, leather ones. And if you ever have questions, our customer service folks keep things rolling. Injured? We're your army. Morgan & Morgan, America's largest injury law firm.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
Ignite your nights with free